Your pancreas could be failing, and you don't know it. This organ, just 15 centimeters long, controls two functions that are decisive for your health after age 60. It produces the insulin that regulates your blood sugar and releases the enzymes that allow you to digest what you eat. The problem is that when it starts to lose efficiency, it almost never gives a clear warning. It usually doesn't hurt. It doesn't set off an obvious alarm. Instead, it sends silent signals that most people mistake for simple indigestion, normal tiredness, or things that come with age. And that's where the danger lies. Many people spend years ignoring these warnings until one day they discover they already have insulin resistance, prediabetes, or even established diabetes. Today I'm going to show you the 4 most important signals your pancreas may be sending before the problem advances further. And number 1 is one of the most ignored, because almost everyone believes it's a normal consequence of aging. Before we continue, I want to ask you a very specific question. After age 60, have you noticed more bloating, more gas, heavy digestion, or that feeling that food takes hours to settle? If that happens to you, write it in the comments, because many people are living with these signals and attributing them to aging or simple indigestion, when the pancreas could be sending a warning. And subscribe, because in the second part, I'm going to show you the more concerning signals and the everyday mistakes that can damage it without you noticing. I'm Dr. Cezar Villareal. I have treated patients with metabolic, digestive, and blood sugar control issues for more than 15 years of clinical practice. What I'm going to share today is backed by research in endocrinology, gastroenterology, and metabolic medicine. I want to be very clear. These signals do not replace a medical evaluation, but recognizing them in time can help you consult your doctor before the damage progresses. If you have unexplained weight loss, persistent vomiting, intense abdominal pain, or very high blood sugar, consult your doctor as soon as possible. Now, before we get into the 4 signals, you need to understand something that almost nobody explains well. When most people hear the word pancreas, they think only of diabetes. But the pancreas is not just the insulin organ. It is also a central piece of your digestion, and that completely changes how you should interpret the signals it sends you. Imagine your pancreas has 2 jobs at the same time. The first is endocrine. That means it releases hormones directly into the blood, especially insulin and glucagon, to keep blood sugar levels stable. The second is exocrine. That means it manufactures digestive enzymes that travel to the intestine to break down fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. If one of these functions fails, there is already a problem. But after age 60, it is not uncommon for both to start losing efficiency little by little. And here the great trap appears. When the pancreas fails in its endocrine function, you may start to notice blood sugar spikes, more fatigue, more hunger, or more thirst. But when it fails in its digestive function, what you feel can seem like something much more trivial: gas, heaviness, slow digestion, unusual stools, intolerance to foods you previously handled perfectly. And since none of these signals say the word pancreas on their face, most people attribute them to age, stress, or a meal that just didn't agree with them. That's where the problem starts hiding in plain sight. Your food may be reaching your intestine, but if you don't receive the proper enzymes, you don't break it down well. Your carbohydrates may be entering your body, but if insulin no longer responds as it once did, that sugar isn't managed efficiently. The result is a double deterioration. You digest worse and you regulate worse. On the outside, it looks like a minor inconvenience. On the inside, the body starts to lose its balance. Think of your pancreas as a small but essential factory. It doesn't take up much space, it doesn't weigh much, but if that factory reduces its output, the whole system feels it. Your digestion becomes less efficient, your energy starts to fluctuate, your glucose stops behaving the way it used to, and the problem doesn't announce itself with a siren. It arrives in the form of repeated details that almost nobody connects to each other. That's why this video matters, because detecting these signals early can make the difference between correcting the problem in time or discovering it when you're already facing prediabetes, diabetes, or more advanced pancreatic insufficiency. Let's go to signal number 4. Number 4, bloating and heaviness after eating, especially after fatty meals. This is where many people start receiving warnings and don't recognize them. They eat something seemingly normal, maybe eggs, cheese, meat, fried food, a large meal, or something with sauce. And 1 or 2 hours later, they feel like the food is still sitting there, as if the stomach hadn't finished its job. Abdominal distension appears, gas, pressure, an exaggerated feeling of fullness, sometimes mild nausea, sometimes burping, sometimes a heaviness that lasts so long it kills the appetite for dinner. Most people say, I just don't digest like I used to. And that's partly true, but the important thing is to ask why. To digest fats, your body depends heavily on pancreatic enzymes, especially lipase. If the pancreas starts producing fewer of these enzymes, the digestion of fat becomes much slower and incomplete. And when fat isn't processed properly, it stays in the system longer, generating fermentation, discomfort, and that very typical feeling that everything landed heavy. I'm not saying that all bloating is a pancreatic problem. Not at all. There can be intestinal, gastric, or biliary causes. But when bloating appears repeatedly, especially after meals rich in fat, and is accompanied by gas, fullness, and persistent discomfort, the pancreas enters the list of important suspects. Don Ricardo, 68 years old, said breakfast just didn't agree with him anymore. If he ate eggs with cheese or anything slightly more substantial, he would bloat. He felt gas for hours and ended the day with the feeling that he had eaten a rock. He thought it was gastritis. They gave him stomach protectors. He improved a little at first, but the discomfort kept coming back. When the picture was studied more carefully, the problem wasn't only in the stomach. There were signs of mild pancreatic insufficiency. It wasn't dramatic pain. It was a digestion that was no longer doing its job properly. That's the pattern I want you to observe. Not an isolated episode, not a one-time meal that didn't agree with you. I'm talking about repetition. I'm talking about a trend, about realizing that little by little, your body started tolerating foods it used to handle without issue. And here comes an important detail. Many people try to solve this by only eliminating heavy foods, but they still don't look at the underlying cause. They change the menu, eat less, resign themselves to living with mediocre digestion, and never ask themselves whether the organ responsible for producing enzymes is starting to fail. If you eat and frequently end up with bloating, gas, and a heaviness that intensifies with fatty foods, fried foods, or large meals, don't dismiss it as something unimportant. Your pancreas could be asking for help in the most silent way possible. And when that help doesn't come, the problem stops feeling only like discomfort. It starts showing up in something much more concrete, something that many people notice but almost never interpret correctly. Signal number 3 appears where few people want to look. Number 3, changes in stools that most people ignore out of embarrassment or habit. I know this isn't a topic people talk about easily, but if you want to understand whether your pancreas is working properly, you have to look at what comes out, not just what goes in. When the pancreas doesn't produce enough digestive enzymes, especially lipase, part of the fat from food isn't absorbed properly, and that fat ends up passing through in the stools. How does it show? In several ways. Stools that are more voluminous than usual, softer or pasty, difficult to clean, with a stronger smell, that float frequently, sometimes with a greasy or shiny appearance, sometimes leaving an oily film on the water in the toilet. This has a medical name, Steatorrhea. And although it doesn't always appear dramatically at first, when it starts to repeat itself, it is a warning that should not be ignored. Think about this. If you eat fats, proteins, and other nutrients, but don't digest or absorb them well, your body isn't really benefiting from what it receives. You are eating, yes, but part of that food is passing through you instead of nourishing your tissues. And that, sustained over time, can lead to nutritional deficiencies, weakness, loss of muscle mass, and unexplained weight loss. Doña Elena, 72 years old, said she didn't understand what was happening to her. She ate similarly to always, but noticed she was going to the bathroom with more urgency, that stools were floating, and that the smell was much stronger than before. Since she was embarrassed to talk about the subject, she went months without mentioning it to anyone. She thought maybe it was the colon. She thought it was nerves. She thought it was normal at her age. When she finally mentioned it at an appointment, it wasn't an unimportant detail. It was a very valuable clue that fat digestion wasn't happening the way it should. Your body speaks. The problem is that it often does so with uncomfortable signals, and so we prefer not to listen. I want you to remember this. Different stools one day don't mean anything on their own. But if for weeks or months you notice they float frequently, are greasier, more difficult to pass or clean, or your intestine no longer behaves as it used to, don't look the other way. Because the intestine may be showing the consequence of something that starts much earlier in the pancreas. And here there is something even more serious. When the body starts absorbing fats poorly, it can also absorb fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K less effectively. That means a sustained digestive failure doesn't only affect your stomach. It can affect your bones, your energy, your immune defenses, and even your blood clotting. That's why this signal deserves far more respect than it usually gets. So far, we've covered two warnings that many people label as bad digestion and keep ignoring. But in the second part, I'm going to show you the two most important signals of all. One involves something many people feel every afternoon and never connect to the pancreas. And number one is so normalized after age 60 that thousands of people live with it for years without knowing their metabolism is already changing. If you recognized yourself in any of these signals so far, write in the comments which one affects you most, bloating after eating or changes in stools. I read you, and subscribe, because in the second part, we're going to get into the signals that point not only to poor digestion, but to problems in blood sugar control that can precede diabetes. Number two, sleepiness, fatigue, or mental fog after eating. Up to this point, we've talked about digestive signals. But from here, the problem starts moving toward the pancreas's other major job, blood sugar control. And this is where many people receive warnings every single day without realizing what they mean. They eat, they finish their plate, and instead of feeling energy, they feel the opposite. A heavy fatigue sets in, sleepiness, mental sluggishness, the urge to sit or lie down. Some describe it as a fog in their head. Others say, after lunch, I'm useless. I shut down. I need coffee. I need something sweet. I need to sleep 20 minutes because my body just gives out. Most people believe this happens because they ate too much, because they're older now, or because it's normal to feel that way after lunch. But it's not always that innocent. When you eat carbohydrates, your blood glucose rises. That rise is normal. What is not so normal is for the body to respond to that rise in an increasingly clumsy way. That's where the pancreas comes in. Its job is to release the right amount of insulin so that glucose enters the cells and is used as energy. But when the pancreas starts losing efficiency, or when tissues become resistant to insulin, blood sugar management becomes more unstable. And how does that instability feel? Sometimes it doesn't feel like high blood sugar. It feels like exhaustion after eating, like a sudden drop in energy, like the body has fuel but doesn't know how to use it properly. Think of it as traffic. The glucose is in the blood. Insulin should open the way for it to enter the cells. But if the signal arrives late, arrives poorly, or the cells no longer respond the same way, the traffic jams, part of the glucose circulates for too long, part enters all at once, and the result can feel like a roller coaster. First you go up, then you crash. Doña Teresa, 70 years old, said lunch robbed her of the afternoon. She ate rice, bread, some potatoes, sometimes dessert, and an hour later she couldn't concentrate. She even struggled to follow a conversation. She thought it was tiredness from age. She thought poor sleep at night was catching up with her. But when her blood glucose and glycated hemoglobin were checked, there was already evidence of prediabetes. What she had been feeling as normal was actually an early signal that her metabolism was no longer responding the way it once did. Here, I want to be precise. Not every feeling of drowsiness after eating means a pancreatic problem. Meal size, sleep quality, certain medications, and even meal timing can all play a role. But when this energy crash appears frequently, especially after meals rich in flour, rice, bread, sweets, or sugary drinks, it's worth stopping, treating it as a simple habit, and starting to see it as a metabolic clue. Because the problem isn't just feeling tired. The problem is what that tiredness may be revealing, that your blood sugar is rising more than it should, that your insulin is no longer working with the same efficiency, or that your body is starting to enter the territory of insulin resistance. And insulin resistance doesn't appear overnight. It installs itself slowly, first as a small imbalance, then as a repeated pattern, and finally as a diagnosis that surprises the person, even though the body had been warning them for years. There's something else. Many people react to this energy crash with the worst possible strategy. They have another coffee with sugar. They eat a cookie. They reach for something sweet to pick themselves up. And what they unintentionally do is feed the very roller coaster that is exhausting them. They raise their blood sugar again, force another insulin response, and keep the pancreas working in an increasingly unstable system. If after eating you feel drained, sleepy, foggy, or without energy, especially if that happens several times a week, don't trivialize it. Sometimes the body doesn't shout. Sometimes it just flips the switch off to tell you that something in your metabolism is no longer working the way it used to. And if this signal repeats itself, it often comes accompanied by another, even more overlooked one, a signal so common after age 60 that thousands of people live with it for years without thinking about the pancreas. Number one, doesn't always cause fear. It doesn't always hurt. But when it appears again and again, it deserves your full attention. Number one, more hunger, more thirst, or more frequent urination than used to be normal. This is the signal that most people justify, and the one that goes unnoticed the longest. It starts subtly. It's not that you're suddenly drinking liters of water nonstop. It's not that overnight you're going to the bathroom 10 times at night. At first, it's something more discreet. You notice you get hungry sooner, that if you have breakfast at 8 by 10:30, you're desperate to eat something. That you finish lunch and 2 or 3 hours later you feel a strange emptiness, as if you hadn't eaten enough. Or you start noticing more thirst, a drier mouth, the need to drink water more frequently. Or you find yourself waking up more often to urinate, especially at night. And you tell yourself that's just part of getting older. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it isn't. When the pancreas is no longer regulating blood sugar properly, or when insulin can no longer keep glucose within adequate ranges, the body starts to compensate in various ways. If glucose remains elevated in the blood, the kidneys try to eliminate part of that excess through urine. And when that happens, they drag more water along with it. That's why many people with blood sugar control problems start urinating more and, as a result, feel more thirsty. On the other hand, when the body doesn't use glucose well, the cells don't receive energy efficiently, and the brain interprets that situation as a lack of fuel. The response? More hunger, more cravings, more of a feeling that you need to eat again even shortly after having eaten. This is one of the most deceptive mechanisms of all. The person feels hungry and thinks the problem is willpower. They feel thirsty and believe they're just not drinking enough water. They wake up to urinate and blame the prostate, age, or the cold. They don't connect the dots. And meanwhile, the metabolism keeps slowly shifting toward prediabetes or diabetes. Don Manuel, 74 years old, started by waking up one extra time at night to urinate, then two. He also said he was thirstier, and that breakfast no longer held him for long. He was always looking for bread, crackers, or something to snack on. He thought it was age. He thought he might be more anxious. He even thought it was normal to have more appetite on certain days. When he finally had blood work done, his fasting glucose was elevated, and his glycated hemoglobin confirmed that his blood sugar had been out of control for some time. What seemed like a collection of small inconveniences was actually a very clear warning from the pancreas and the metabolism. Here too, I want to be fair. More thirst, more hunger, or more frequent urination are not exclusive to a pancreatic problem. There are other possible causes, but when several of these signals appear together, or when they gradually settle in as a new normal, ignoring them is a mistake, because that's what does the most damage after age 60. Normalizing deterioration, normalizing that you now get sleepy after every meal, normalizing that your stomach is always bloated, normalizing that your stools have changed, normalizing that you need to eat more often, normalizing that water is never enough, normalizing that you urinate more and that it happens to everyone. No, not everything that becomes frequent is normal, and not everything that comes with age should be accepted without asking questions. Your body changes with the years, yes, but there's a difference between aging and ignoring signals that a key organ is starting to lose capacity. The pancreas doesn't usually announce its problems with intense pain at first. It announces them with repeated details, with small changes in digestion, with shifts in energy, with metabolic signals that seem insignificant until they no longer are. That's why I wanted to make this video, because many people believe that pancreatic problems are only discovered through a surprise diagnosis. And the reality is that most of the time, the body had been speaking for years. What was missing was understanding the language. Let's review the 4 signals. Number 4, bloating and heaviness after eating, especially with fatty or large meals. Number 3, changes in stools, especially if they float, are greasier, more voluminous, or difficult to clean. Number 2, sleepiness, fatigue, or mental fog after eating, especially when it appears after flour, rice, bread, sweets, or carbohydrate-heavy meals. And number 1, more hunger, more thirst, or more frequent urination than used to be normal. 4 signals. 4 ways the pancreas may be asking for help before a more serious diagnosis arrives. I want to emphasize something important. This video is not so you can self-diagnose. It's so you don't ignore patterns that deserve evaluation. If you recognized yourself in several of these signals, especially if they have been getting worse over time, it's worth talking to your doctor and asking for a proper assessment. Sometimes simple blood tests are enough to detect a problem at a much more manageable stage. And now comes the part that almost nobody explains to you. What things are damaging it in silence? What foods, habits, and daily mistakes can force the pancreas to work worse and worse? Because recognizing the signals is the first step, but understanding what is pushing it toward the problem is what truly allows you to stop it. That is exactly what I'm going to show you in the next video. If this content helped you, write in the comments which of these signals surprised you most, or which one you or someone in your family has noticed. I read all the comments, and if you know someone over 60 who lives with heavy digestion, sleepiness after meals, or strange changes in their blood sugar, share this video with them. Sometimes timely information prevents years of silent deterioration. Take care of your pancreas, take care of your metabolism, take care of your life,